Today, we're seeing a starting range at about $1,800 to $2,200. So when we start to think about all of the things that impact that change, a lot of the things are going to be the large catastrophe losses, like the natural catastrophes, right? The forest fires, the hail claims out of Calgary. All of those things really impact the rate. So the premise of insurance is the premiums of the many cover the losses of the few, right? As those premiums or the losses of the few get greater, our insurance premiums start to climb.
Right. So with the weather changing and in a little bit more extreme conditions, it's probably something that we're probably going to see that continue, correct?
Exactly, absolutely. Another one of the things that have really impacted the rates would be when I started in insurance 20 years ago, overland water wasn't covered. So things like flooding, right? There was disaster relief programs put in place from the government that covered that sort of thing. Then the government went, hold on a second, this is starting to deplete some of our funds. So really pushed insurance companies to create a product to cover that as well. So that's a whole nother coverage too with the natural disasters that kind of get pushed back to the consumer a bit there.
Okay, today we are here with Nicole Friesen. She's with HK Henderson Navicord, and she's going to be telling us all about what's happening in the insurance world. We all have a connection with it, and we need some clarification. So thanks for coming on today, Nicole.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Perfect. So insurance has seen a huge increase over, say the last 20 years. Can you give us a little bit of an idea of the landscape and how that has changed for the insurance world?
Absolutely. So when I started in the business, an average home insurance policy probably ranged between $700 and $1,200. Right. Today, we're seeing a starting range at about $1,800 to $2,200.
Okay.
So when we start to think about all of the things that impact that change, a lot of the things are going to be the large catastrophe losses, like the natural catastrophes, right? The forest fires, the hail claims out of Calgary. All of those things really impact the rate. So the premise of insurance is the premiums of the many cover the losses of the few, right? As those premiums or the losses of the few get greater, our insurance premiums start to climb.
Right. So with the weather changing and in a little bit more extreme conditions, it's probably something that we're probably going to see that continue, correct?
Exactly, absolutely. Another one of the things that have really impacted the rates would be when I started in insurance 20 years ago, overland water wasn't covered. So things like flooding, right? There was disaster relief programs put in place from the government that covered that sort of thing. Then the government went, hold on a second, this is starting to deplete some of our funds. So really pushed insurance companies to create a product to cover that as well. So that's a whole nother coverage too with the natural disasters that kind of get pushed back to the consumer a bit there.
Okay. So what would be some things that, people are buying a home, right? They're looking for, to get the insurance in place before possession. What are some of the things that, the insurance professional should be asking? Say if they're not working with you and they're working with somebody else, what questions should the buyers be asking to making sure that they're covered in all aspects?
Absolutely. So one of the biggies is they want to make sure that they know everything about your house. So the updates, the year, the roof, all of those sorts of things matter now. They didn't used to matter. It used to be, what's your date of birth? How many years have you been insured? What year is your house, right? We asked you about 15 questions and you could get a policy in place. Now they want to know what kind of plumbing you have, what kind of electrical you have, the age of the roof, all of these different questions. What age is your furnace? All of that has an impact on the rate now, as well as how long you've been in insurance, what your credit score is like. All of these things now tie into rate. So if you're not being asked a lot of questions at the start, you should probably be a bit concerned because they do all play into the
Well, no one wants
rate.
things to burn down and to not be able to replace the house, right?
Absolutely.
So things have changed obviously a lot about how much information that you're looking for. Now, who's the one that's supposed to be providing that information? Just because we get a lot of questions, and the reason I ask is we get a lot of questions from the purchaser saying what are all these things in there, and I say to people, check your home inspection. I'm not the home inspector. I don't know all the ins and the outs of these things, is there someplace else that we should be looking, or who's responsible for that?
At the end of the day, it's the home buyer that's responsible,
Okay.
right? There is lots of places they can go for the information. They can go to their home inspection. We offer that all the time.
Right.
What we say is take out the little snippets of the pieces from your home inspection that we need and provide just the information. Sometimes people are like, here's my whole home inspection. But as you know, there's always going to be things in the home inspection that are warning or red flags or things that maybe a homeowner might have to take care of.
Yeah.
As an insurance broker, though, we do have a due diligence to the insurance company. So I would say once we see it,
I get it. You can't go back.
we can't unsee
Yeah,
it,
for
right?
sure.
And so I would say the home inspection's a great place. The previous buyer, so in that place where you're still in communications with
Yeah.
the seller, make sure that you have your home insurance at least 80% wrapped up, right? You can
Right.
choose the company and all that stuff after,
Yeah.
but if all of a sudden you lose contact with someone that's lived in that home for the last 5, 8, 20 years,
Right.
how do you get the information?
Right.
And if the information's incorrect, it really does fall on the person that provided the info.
Right. Okay. So you're responsible for what you say there. At the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Okay. So you mentioned a little bit earlier about water cover, or about the water escape, the sewer backup. Is it an overland water protection? Can you give us a little bit of a breakdown of of how that works, a little bit more detail from your perspective there?
I can. Water protection is one of the most confusing coverages that we would have on the personal insurance side of things, right? Because there's water escape, which is if your pipe bursts and your basement fills up with water, water escape is covered under your main coverages typically. Of course, I'm talking in generalities,
Right.
but typically that's already covered. Then you've got sewer backup, which is the coverage that comes in through the pipes. If there's a huge rain or something like that, the sewer system gets overloaded, that comes into the basement. And then there's, as we alluded to before, overland water protection.
Right.
So that's if it rains and rains and rains and water comes in through the doors and the windows, that's a whole different coverage on its own. And the caveat to all of it is going to be seepage, which is not really covered under insurance, right? If there's a crack in your foundation,
Right.
water sneaks in there every winter or every spring when the snow melts. That's not covered under insurance. That's considered home maintenance, right? They're going to want you to repair the foundation of your home,
Right.
because that's home maintenance. Home maintenance is always one of those tricky things, because even if a pipe bursts, they're going to cover everything that has to do with the water and the damage that water created, but they're not going to pay to fix the pipe, because fixing the pipe is home maintenance, right? So
Okay.
it's a funny line. It's such a funny coverage, and it's really quite complicated
Right.
once you do start to get some of that water damage.
So when we're looking at that, so like sewer backup and those kind of things, like, I remember at one point I put a backwater flow valve into my house, and it changed my insurance by like $1,000 a year. So things like that, obviously, that makes a big difference. But overland water protection is that there wouldn't be anything for that, like that. That's an extra, correct?
It is. It's an extra.
Yeah.
You can
And then seepage is never covered.
correct.
Okay. Okay.
And-
I'm sure there's
and
a lot
back
of people
to
out there that
things-
didn't want to hear that, but
Back to things you should let your home insurance
Yeah.
provider know
Okay.
is, do you have a mainline
flow valve.
backwater valve? It does make a huge difference.
Yeah.
So all of those things matter.
yeah, great, perfect. So we talked a little about insurance rates keep on climbing. Is there a point where we're going to see that slow down a little bit? Is it kind of steady that we're going to see? I know we can't tell about natural disasters and those kind of things, but is everything leading towards that there's going to continue to be an increase in insurance costs? typically?
As of today,
Yeah.
I would say yes. Either we're going to start to see higher deductibles,
Okay.
more limited coverage. At the end of the day, and what sometimes people forget are insurance companies are still businesses, right? And they need to be profitable too. So they really do go back to the data at the end of the year and say, did we make money? Did we
Right.
not make money? And what does that look like? So there is options though, right? You can always look at adjusting the level of coverage you have. You could look at your deductible coverage. There are things you can do to mitigate it, but I don't think those base rates
Right.
are really going to level off in
like
the near
everything,
future.
no? Like everything's inflation just seems to drive everything up. So I didn't
Exactly.
expect that it was going to be going down, but I'm just kind of curious on what's your side of things. Is sometimes that we're seeing, a jump in things, and then they might, level off a little bit, right?
What we did see is when there was a huge jump, what they did was they did some research and they said, hey, we're starting to notice that people that have really good credit scores seem to make less small insurance claims. They are able to shoulder those things better on their own.
Of course, makes sense.
So then what we would say is every time there's those increases, they are trying to find discounts for the ideal client.
Okay.
So, I think that overarchingly, right, if you live and you try to live in good upstanding in all of your life, that does kind of play into what that looks like for the insurance rates as well.
No, that makes sense. So unfortunate that we do have things that we need insurance, like, a house burns down or maybe it's the hail damage or those kind of things. But how is when someone is rebuilding a house, how can it be so different from what a person pays for it? Like, can you break down a little bit? Like, I know that obviously there's not land value, there's not, all those things aren't considered. You're just talking about the dwelling. But can you give us a little bit of breakdown of maybe how that process works and maybe how much of it's paid out and that kind of stuff?
For sure. This is a great question, and it's something we get asked all the time. So when you purchase a house, the rebuild cost of that house can be varyingly different dependent upon what area of a city or a town it's in, right? Mm-hmm. Is it in a desirable neighborhood, a less desirable neighborhood? If we have to rebuild the structure, it's going to cost the same. So we have people come in all the time and say, it can't be that much. I paid less than that to buy the house, and I got the land in there, right? But what we're looking at is insurance companies have approved replacement cost tools or replacement cost calculators that we use.
Right.
This is why you need all the information, right? How many bathrooms, how many square feet, what kind of roofing, what kind of siding, do you have an attached or a detached garage, all of those sorts of things. And we take all that information and put it into the reconstruction calculator. Mm-hmm. That spits out, like location aside, how much it's going to cost to rebuild this structure. And then it adds in things like debris removal, the amounts of money that would be cost to fence in the site to contain it, all of those sorts of things. And there's probably a slight premium built in there too, because if your house burns down, they want to get you back in there quickly. Right. So this isn't like tender it out and get a ton of bids and it's not a long drawn out process. They ideally would like you to be back in your house within 12 to 18 months. Right. So when you add the time factor,
quick in our market to build things that quickly. Yeah.
So all of that goes into how much we have to insure it for according to the insurance company standards.
Right. So would it typically be something where, are you built, like you're paying out usually 80% of the value of it, or is it the full value for people? So
when we're insuring a typical owner-occupied home, we need to insure to 100% of the value to be eligible for something that we call a guaranteed replacement cost. Right. So that, let's say we insured your house for $300,000 and at the end of the day it costs $320,000 to rebuild. That's coming out of the insurance company pocket, not out of your pocket, right, to get you back to what you had. Right. The problem here is in non-owner occupied dwellings, so rentals, things like that, right? Because you can't get that guaranteed replacement cost. Okay. And lots of times we see this fight, right, where people say, I only have a $100,000 mortgage on it. I don't really want a ton of insurance on this, so just insure it to $100,000. But we get in. Flag to me. We do get into this struggle where there is co-insurance involved in insurance, and co-insurance is a really tricky concept. But to put it really plainly, if the house costs $200,000 to rebuild and you only want to insure it for $100,000, in a total loss situation, they're going to write you your check, right? They're going to say, "Here's your $100,000. We know you're not going to build this house for more than that. Right. Yeah. See you later." In a partial loss, maybe there's a kitchen fire, maybe there's a roof that got damaged from hail. The insurance company comes in and then they go, wait a second, what half of this are you insuring and what half are we insuring? Because you're paying premiums for half this house. Right. So you're choosing to self-insure half that house. So whatever that variance is, you have to take on that ownership and that responsibility. So it'd be kind of like 50% of what they actually like. If they're paying 50, if it's easy numbers of one and 200, right? Yeah. Then they'd probably be, and say the
the construction cost was 50, you'd probably be breaking it down to 25,000.
Exactly. So
Okay.
you're getting your percentage. So what insurance companies have done to mitigate that is that they do give us a bit of choice, but this is where they say, we want you to insure to at least 80% of the value.
Right.
Right? Maybe
Okay.
you don't need that full amount, but as long as you're insuring to 80% in a partial loss situation, we would pay.
So when you are looking at, say the replacement costs and full rebuild, that kind of stuff, how many quotes would you have to go out and get to be able to do that? Like, I know builders really don't want to quote properly, they know they're not going to be building the house, right? And so how many
Absolutely.
would you have to go through to be able to get that? Because it is a lot on the homeowner's side to be able to, I guess, to coordinate these things, to get the contractors to do that, correct? Yeah.
It is. Typically, they want to see 2 to 3 quotes.
Okay.
Now, normally when there's a loss, a disaster relief company is going to come in and they're going to typically offer a quote for that rebuild. So there's
Right.
usually a baseline involved in the
get
people
it.
that come in to mitigate the loss.
Right.
And then they'd want one more quote after that.
Okay.
If neither of those seem reasonable, they could ask for a third quote, but
Right.
3 is usually the max that we would see.
Okay.
If quote 1 or quote 2 is reasonable, the insurance companies also want to move things along,
yeah,
right?
I get
No
it.
one wants to sit here and have a quote claim open for 2 or 3 extra months.
Right.
So
Well, and they're also starting to cover some of like their costs and where they're living and those kind of things as well too. So there's
Exactly.
benefits on both sides for them, right?
exactly.
Okay. No, that sounds good. Well, thanks for clarifying because that's a big one for people. When it comes to levels of coverage for their home, it's not just a one-step policy. Like, is that people can pick and choose of, even though they have to have insurance, they can still pick and choose of what levels of insurance. Can you kind of give us a breakdown of where, what some of the options would be for people?
For
in that
sure,
regard?
absolutely. So we would always talk about comprehensive coverage, which is the very best coverage you can buy, and then broad coverage, which is the second best coverage you can buy. There are levels below that, but typically if you had an insurance broker that's quoting you anything like that, that's probably not in your best
keep on looking,
interest.
hey? Yeah,
Exactly.
okay.
So both of those levels of coverage are going to cover your building the same.
Okay.
We always want to make sure that your house is usually one of, if not the biggest investment of your life, right? So if something happens to the structure of your home, we want to make sure that if we could have covered it, we did.
Right.
So the difference between the two types of coverage really is how we're covering your contents.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So on a comprehensive coverage, really they say for your home and your contents, we're going to cover you for everything except. And then there's always exceptions to.
Like, what would they be?
So you'd be thinking like damage caused by domestic pets,
Okay.
mold,
Right.
damage that happens continuously over time.
Right.
You
So
know,
wear and tear.
wear
Yeah.
and tear,
Yeah.
like that kind of thing, right? Things that typically people don't expect to be covered for.
Right.
Normally,
yeah. Most-
people, my dog chewed through my door. Well, you chose to have a dog, and he chews through the door. Like we can't help that. And it's also they just don't want you to turn a blind eye to current damage, right? So those would be really common exclusions on a home insurance policy.
Right.
Now, when we switch gears to going to that broad coverage, again, the home policy, like the home is still insured the same way. It's how you're covering your contents that differs. And so now you have, instead of saying you're covered for everything except, your contents is now going to be covered for like 14 specific things, fire, lightning, explosion, implosion, smoke, riot, falling objects, vandalism and malicious acts, water escape and rupture. I missed a lot in there, but you get the
Great
picture.
examples. Though, yeah.
What's not covered for your contents that we always tell people about is going to be mysterious disappearance or damage you do yourself to your contents. So like I take off my watch and my rings and I throw them on the windowsill. I come downstairs the next morning and you're like, they're gone. Did someone walk in the front door and snag them? Did my dog grab them and bury them in my backyard? Did they fall down the sink? I can't find it.
Right.
That'd be covered on a comp policy, but not covered on a broad policy.
Okay.
As well as damage you do yourself, right? You sit on the sofa with something sharp in your pocket and you cut through the leather.
Right.
That could be something that would be covered on a comprehensive policy, but not covered on a broad policy.
Do people actually claim things like that? Sorry, but like,
We would say, I would say
that.
like dependent upon the value, right? Some
Right.
people have $20,000 sofas.
Yeah, I get it,
And
yeah.
I pay $1,000 deductible and I get a $20,000 sofa
Right.
back. Some people have really expensive artwork, right?
Yeah.
Or expensive jewelry. So those would be the things. And that's the conversation you should be having with your insurance broker.
Right.
Do you have really expensive things? Do you have expensive taste? Is it worth it to get the tiered up coverage? And typically we're talking about like $300 a year
Right,
in the
okay.
difference. So you've got someone young that's just getting into the home market, and that $300 could really make a difference.
sure.
Somebody a little bit more established, you're typically seeing them go to the comprehensive package.
Right. So the broad side of things is that would still cover personal belongings, but
Correct.
not nearly as many, basically.
It covers all your belongings. It's just, what do they cover them for?
Okay,
It's
right.
that, like, they don't cover them for mysterious disappearance, and they don't cover them
Okay.
for damage you do yourself, right? So it has to fit neatly into one of the coverage boxes.
Right. Makes sense. It's always got to fit in a box. So no one wants to do this, but if you had to make a claim, what is the process for people to actually have to go through it? Can you give us a little breakdown on that one?
I can. Claims. I love this topic.
Do you?
It's a good one.
That's good.
I would say always start with having the conversation with your insurance broker.
Right.
Sometimes we have to talk people out of making a claim.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, if you're going to claim something little and you're going to lose a claims-free discount and you're going to pay $1,000 deductible, like, at the end of the day, sometimes people are behind. Like, they're at a deficit
Right.
at the end of this process,
Yeah.
right? That being said, if it is a large claim, the process would be to contact your insurance broker. They start up a claim with the insurance carrier, and then you really start to deal with your adjuster that you get assigned and the client, right? They talk to each other, and what our role as insurance brokers is to advocate for the client if something goes south or to sideways. It's to answer coverage questions. We get a lot of that, right? Like, I don't understand why this would be included in the claim, but this wouldn't be.
Right.
And it's really our job to take the wordings and to take everything, work through that, and make sure that A, you're getting what you deserve, but B, sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's to say, actually, the repair to the pipe is your responsibility
Right.
as a homeowner, but they will cover all that other water damage. So, and our goal there is to really help it tick along so that you don't get stuck with an unfinished basement for 18 months.
Yeah, doesn't sound fun at all. So what would you say, like, a lot of people are, where's that kind of line for people? And maybe you don't have this exact, but if we're dealing with $1,000, deductible, does it make sense? Like, to me, it doesn't even make sense to even consider it unless it's double the price, because you're going to have insurance premiums that are going to go up. You're going to lose your, kind of one-time, I forget what you said there, like the no deductible.
Oh,
for
yeah,
the
yeah.
first,
Your claims free.
yeah, claims
discount.
free. So
Yeah.
where would you find that, like, actually starts to make sense for people to bring you involved, to get you involved?
I would say probably anything in that $2,500 range, right?
okay.
It's at least worth a conversation. Now, if you had a $10,000 premium and you've got like $1 million house, that number is going to look different. But for your
so.
average consumer, you're probably looking $2,500. It's worth picking up the phone. At
Okay.
least you can have a conversation. Some people might say $5,000, but really it depends on your situation, right? Do you want to take the lower deductible and replace your stuff now? Or do you want to feel that loss spread out a little bit over the next 5 years?
Right, right. Well, that's awesome. I'm learning things today, so that's good. That's good. All right, Nicole, is it in your career? I'm sure that you've seen some claims be denied. What would be some circumstances that would actually put a claim into being denied or not being dealt with?
Absolutely. The biggies are going to be ownership. So if you say that you own something and you don't own it, there's
a tenant
potential,
occupied it,
or vacancy. If you say you're living in a house, but you're actually renting that house out, right? They get there and you've got 3 renters in there, but you said you had 1 renter. All of those things really do impact the
Right.
claim situation. And those are opportunities for an insurance company to deny a claim. Other things that we've seen that have led to really strong investigation or denial is trying to put through a fraudulent claim, right? Like saying you had a TV, a 60-inch flat screen in every room in the house. Well, where's the proof of that? And if you
Right.
can't prove it and it's truly fraudulent, we can get into some hot water there. I would say the other piece of that is knowing misrepresentation, right?
Right.
Aluminum wiring is really hard to get insurance on.
I get it.
And if you've gone to 3 insurance brokers, you've said you had aluminum wiring, and they've all said, "Ugh, until you get X, Y, and Z fixed, we can't get you insurance." So you go to the 4th one, and you say, "No, I have copper wiring."
Right.
Right? And you knowingly do that. Those are the things that really can get a claim denial down a hard path.
Yeah, we've had a lot of that. I've had electrical inspections just because there's been one, aluminum wire that's been put in the 70s, and next thing you know is that we need a whole inspection on the house and a quote for, redoing all the wiring and that kind of stuff. But basically you're saying is that be honest and don't lie to people then, hey?
Be honest.
That's
and
going to go a long way.
Be honest and don't lie. There's intentional
Yeah.
misrepresentation, and
Yeah.
then there's like obvious misrepresentation. At the end of the day, they all could have the same impact.
Right.
But I think, we are in the business of helping people. We want to help people in their hardest times. They're not going to look for it unless it's like blatantly obvious
Yeah.
that there was a problem here.
Okay. No, that's awesome. That gives us a little more insight into what not to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Nicole. It was a pleasure having you on, and we'll have to do it again sometime.
For sure. I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.